Hey there, and welcome into another episode of the Route 1 Rundown. I'm your host, Steve Gorgie, and I'm thrilled to be back to talk some Terps. But before I dive into everything going on in College Park, including Maryland's 90-81 win over Rutgers, a reminder that this show is on YouTube and part of the Department of Hoops, a DMV media network. So if you're listening to this in audio form, but you want to be watching it, you want to see my face, then you got to go and check it out on YouTube. That's youtube.com/@Department of Hoops. If you love local basketball, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, because we got this show. We got Wizards coverage, GW coverage, George Mason coverage. If you love the local hoop scene, then you're going to love the Department of Hoops. So make sure you go and check it out. And you know what else you're probably loving? You are loving Maryland's 90-81 victory today, because the Terps bounced back in a big way after a heartbreaker against Ohio State, one where they had this big lead, 17-point lead, not able to make it stand up. Bruce Thornton goes wild in the second half, hits that bank-in 3-game winner. Maryland bounces back with a home victory. Maryland stays undefeated in Big Ten play at home, and they move to 18-6, 8-5 in the conference, and they kind of right the ship, so to speak. And to me, this game was the Derik Queen don't forget about me game. This was the Derik Queen, hey, I am still here. I'm still the best freshman in the Big Ten game. Because Derik Queen went off today to the tune of 29 points, 15 boards, 6 of them offensive rebounds, 5 assists, a block, and a steal. And not only did he put up big numbers, he did it on a day when he was sharing the court with 2 guys who are on Rutgers, who were part of his recruiting class, who, along with him and Cooper Flagg and some other guys, have long been among the top-rated players in the country in high school. You know, we're in an era where it doesn't really matter where you grow up. If you're a top player in the country, you know the other top players in the country because of AAU, because of the recruiting circuit, because of everything that modern-day youth basketball is. So Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper, guys that were the number 2 and 3 recruits in the class of 2024. That's of course Derik Queen's class. The number 2 and 3 players in the class per 24/7 Sports composite rankings were on the court facing off against Derik Queen. And these are guys that he's played against his whole youth career, his AAU career. They were 2 and 3 in the rankings. His high school teammate, of course, Cooper Flagg, number 1 in those rankings, and Derik Queen, number 12. And Derik Queen sharing the court with those guys today with a lot of NBA scouts in attendance, put on an absolute show. And there's been so much talk. Is Queen hitting a freshman wall? Is Queen, is having a hard time adjusting to the rigors of Big Ten basketball? Because he got off to this incredible start to the season. They go to Mackey. He puts up 26 in Purdue. Before that, his first ever college game, he has a double-double, 22 points, 20 boards in his first ever college basketball game against Manhattan. And lately here, we've seen a little more inconsistency against Ohio State. I actually thought he played a pretty good game against Ohio State personally, outside of the free throw shooting. Derik Queen, a very good free throw shooter. He goes 7 for 13 from the stripe in that game. Maryland as a team did not shoot well in that game. They didn't shoot that great today either, by the way. But that was a problem against Ohio State. You saw in other games this season, the Northwestern game comes to mind. He just never kind of got in a rhythm, got in a flow. But there are games where you see everything that Derik Queen brings to the table. And this was the Derik Queen, I'm still here game. I'm not going anywhere game. I am still one of the best players on the court, one of the best players in the country anytime I step on the court. And look, I can rattle off the numbers, but the numbers only mean so much. When you think about Derik Queen, it's the moments. And it's these unbelievable flashes of his skill. What makes Derik Queen so special and why I love watching this guy play basketball is all the different things he can do. He's such a multi-dimensional player. If you ask me to describe Derik Queen in one word, it's versatile. If you ask me to describe Derik Queen It's that he's multifaceted. He can do so many different things, and that's why I love watching him play. And just in this game alone, like, you read the stat line, and he had 29 points, it shows he can score. 15 rebounds, including 6 on the offensive glass. It shows that he has a toughness to him, that he can go and rebound. 5 assists, it shows his great court vision. A block and a steal, his defensive prowess as well. But there were moments in this game, like early in the first half, where he's going up against Ace Bailey, who, by the way, is the Big Ten's leading scorer. Not the Big Ten's leading scorer for a freshman, but Ace Bailey is a guy who was averaging more points per game than anybody else in the entire Big Ten. Ace Bailey, 20.1 points per game, ahead of Nick Martinelli, Dawson Garcia, Bryce Williams, Dylan Harper, his teammate, who is also a freshman, Trey Kaufman-Wren, who we've seen, John Tonje, who we've seen, Bruce Thornton, who we've seen, Owen Freeman at Iowa, Desmond Claude at USC. Ace Bailey is ahead of all those guys, averaging just a tad over 20 points per game. And Ace Bailey came into this game, and apparently he was a little bit under the weather, sick with something like flu-like symptoms, something along those lines. Dylan Harper suffered from that a couple weeks ago, or a week or so ago, a little bit before. Anyway, sometime in the last couple weeks, he has been in and out of the lineup with some sickness as well. But today, Ace Bailey was on the court. He was on the court, leading scorer in the Big Ten, and there was a sequence in the first half where Derik Queen blocked him, and I mean, it looked like man versus boy at that moment with Derik Queen and Ace Bailey. You would never have known in that moment, and I get it, Bailey a little bit banged up, a little bit under the weather. Derik Queen looked like the man in that situation. So Derik Queen blocks him in that spot. Then later in the first half, you have this moment where Jordan Geronimo gets back-to-back dunks. And on the first one, Derik Queen has this great touch pass. He gets the ball, great touch pass to Geronimo, who throws it down. Just illustrates his vision, right? In the second half, there was a couple moments that I want to call out that just, I think, show so much about Derik Queen and why he's so special. There was a point in the second half where he gets this put back dunk. An emotional play, right? Brings the house down. Then with about 6.5 minutes to go, he does the Jokic one-leg fadeaway. They're playing defense on him pretty tight out on that left wing there. I forget who it was, number 99. I think it's Martini, number 99 on Rutgers. Martini's playing him pretty tough. He's playing pretty good defense on him. And Derik Queen goes to the Jokic one-leg fadeaway and drills this shot. And it's like, you throw your hands up if you're the defender, if you're a Rutgers fan, you're like, what can we do with that? How can we stop that? An unbelievable display of skill by Derik Queen in that moment to hit that shot. And it's not like this is a game that's out of hand. It's not like this is a 20-point game. Maryland's up 20, 25. The walk-ons are in. Everybody's having fun. This is a 9-point game in conference play. Maryland's coming off a loss, really needs this win. And Maryland in this game had a bigger lead, and Rutgers had chipped away at it. And I think there was a nervous energy in the building, but none of that seems to get to Derik Queen. And in this 9-point game with 6.5 minutes to go, he hits the Jokic one-leg fadeaway. Unbelievable display of skill by Derik Queen. And then there's one more moment I want to call out, because with 4 minutes left, again, we're on the left wing here, and they run a pick and roll, high ball screen. Rutgers blitzes Jacoby Gillespie. So he gets the ball to Queen. Really, nobody's in front of him. So Dylan Grant, who had a really, really nice game for Rutgers, comes out to challenge him. He's on that help. He comes out to challenge him. Derik Queen crosses him up and then yams it, dunks it. And that is Derik Queen in a nutshell. There's so many guys that we've seen come through Maryland. It's not shade to them, but there are experienced big men that we've seen play at Maryland who, in that situation, if they got the ball, nobody in front of them, the defender comes out to challenge them, would have either picked up the ball or maybe have lost it. There's so few that would have had the skill to cross up Dylan Grant like that and then dunk it. But all of those things together are what makes Derik Queen so special. It's his toughness. It's his ability to go up and get the ball. It's his post moves. He can operate in the post, in the low post, back to the basket. He can start the fast break. He can make a great touch pass. He makes smart decisions on the pick and roll. He can cross you up. He can yam it on your head. He can do everything, and he's a freshman. This is his first year playing college basketball, and Kevin Willard has talked about it time and time again. The Big Ten is an old league. The Big Ten is a physical league. You have guys like Steven Crow from Wisconsin in the Big Ten who have been playing in this league forever, who know it well. And look, I know there's been inconsistency at times with Derik Queen. But at the end of the day, when Derik Queen gives you a game like today, when Derik Queen does what he did at Mackey back in December, I think the toughest environment in the whole Big Ten. I think that's the best team in the Big Ten personally. I think Purdue is the best team in this conference. When you see Derik Queen do the things that he does, it's impossible to not enjoy it. So he's had his ups and downs, certainly, this freshman year. That Northwestern game, again, really sticks out. It wasn't a good game for anybody, honestly. But against Indiana, it's not like he had a great game either. 7 points in 35 minutes. He had a good game on the glass, but I thought he struggled in that game because they have a lot of size. They have a lot of experience. But when you see him do things like did in this game against Rutgers, it's impossible not to just marvel at what Derik Queen can bring to the table. It's impossible not to enjoy what you're seeing if you're a fan of basketball. And to me, that's kind of what makes him one of the most fun players that I've ever watched at Maryland. I mean, honestly, I was thinking about this because that's what I'm thinking as I'm watching this game. I'm just marveling at Derik Queen, as I'm sure a lot of you all were too. And I really just enjoy watching this guy play so much because of everything he brings to the table, because of his intelligence on the basketball court. Derik Queen is a winning player. You can win a lot of basketball games because of Derik Queen, with Derik Queen. That's why, in part, Maryland's going to be such a tough out for anybody that they play come tournament time, because you have extraordinarily high-level talent on the court with Derik Queen, especially. Just everything else aside, just from a talent perspective, Derik Queen can step on the court with anybody in the country and know he is as talented as anybody out there. He really, truly is. But I start thinking during the game, like, who else would go up there for me as far as Maryland players that I just love to watch, that I enjoyed watching? Not their impact on the program, not what they accomplished, not how good they were, not how good their careers were, but just enjoyed watching. Who were the players I enjoyed watching the most over the course of my time watching Maryland basketball? And look, I go back quite a way with Maryland basketball. I think realistically, I could tell you I have very, very good knowledge of Maryland basketball, probably going back to like the 97-98 season. I think that, that's 28 seasons now that I can go back and say, I really remember these guys. I remember their games. I remember how they played. I mean, look, growing up, there was nothing I was more obsessed with than Maryland basketball. There was nothing I spent more time watching, obsessing about, thinking about than Maryland basketball. So I go back roughly 30 years with Maryland basketball where I can feel confident saying, hey, these were the guys I really enjoyed the most. These were the guys I loved to watch. And immediately there's like 4 guys that come to my mind that I think you put in the same category. For me personally, this is a personal exercise for sure, and I'd love to hear from you all. Tell me, who were the players that you've enjoyed watching most in Maryland history? Put it in the YouTube chat. Hit me up on Twitter at Gorgon Sports, Instagram, TikTok. I'm all everywhere across the internet, Blue Sky, all at the same handle at Gorgon Sports. Definitely hit me up there, because I want to hear from you. I want you to be a part of the show. Who were the players that you enjoyed watching most over your time as a Maryland fan? But for me, there's a few that stand out, and I'll kind of go in reverse order, chronological order, starting from my earliest memories. This man might be the one that I have enjoyed watching the most. And again, I put Derik Queen in a class with these guys because of everything that he does. But for me, Steve Francis in that 99 season was one of the most fun players, the most electrifying players to ever watch. And look, granted, I was young at the time, but Steve Francis seemed larger than life at the time. Steve Francis felt like a phenomenon at the time. Everybody that I was in school with, everybody that I talked to who loves sports, couldn't take their eyes off Steve Francis. And in 99, Steve Francis felt like he was the next big thing. He felt like a guy who could be an NBA star, and he was for a little while for sure. Steve Francis was very much an NBA star, but he was high flying. He was electrifying. The man could jump out of the gym. And for me, he's just one of the guys I've always enjoyed watching the most. So he's kind of the first guy going back in history that comes to my mind. Then kind of scrolling up, going through a little bit later, time goes on. I mean, this guy, of course, one of the best players in Maryland history, but I think also one of the most enjoyable players is Juan Dixon, just because of his silky smooth game. Nobody has ever been smoother. Nobody has ever been more consistent over the 30 or so years that I really have a deep knowledge of Maryland basketball than Juan Dixon. And of course, he's everywhere in the Maryland record book. He was the best player on Maryland's one national championship team. He is Maryland. He is Maryland basketball. He's the all-time leading scorer, but the silkiness, the smoothness. I mean, I can just picture it in my head, as I'm sure you can, if you were a Terps fan at the time, him coming off that screen and hitting that elbow jumper, the way he shot the ball from beyond the arc, the way he always came up big in a big moments. To me, I mean, you have to put Juan Dixon on that list as far as the most fun players to watch go. And a couple other guys that I'm going to name here. For me, this is a guy who was really special to me because he was there when I was in school, and he was a guy that I felt a very special kind of connection with because I could relate to the emotion that he played with. That's Greivis Vasquez. And Greivis Vasquez, to me, I enjoyed watching him for a couple reasons. One, I just mentioned, is that emotion that he played with. I love that fire, that passion. You could tell he loved Maryland basketball. You could tell he loved the game of basketball. And you could tell how much he wanted to win each and every time he took the court. And he, like Derik Queen, he had inconsistency throughout his career, no doubt. Throughout his career, at times, he struggled with turnovers, especially earlier on. He was not always, believe it or not, if you weren't around during that time, if you weren't a Terps fan during that time, and you kind of just know about Greivis Vasquez and some of those teams, he wasn't always a beloved player on those teams among the fan base. And he really turned into that his senior year. But Greivis Vasquez was a guy who, like Derik Queen, in a very different way, was so versatile. Because Greivis Vasquez was a 6'6" point guard. Greivis Vasquez was a guy who could run the point, but you could also get him in the post. He had unbelievable court vision. He was a good enough shooter. He could get to the basket, and he had this creative touch around the rim. I mean, I'll never forget his final game at Xfinity Center, at the time Comcast Center, senior night against Duke, with a share of the ACC on the line. He hits this runner in the last minute of the game. That's like, how in the world did this guy hit it? But that was Greivis Vasquez. So they're not similar players at all, him and Derik Queen, but in a way they are, because they were both versatile. And that's why I always love watching Greivis Vasquez. And then my last guy here, he's a guy who doesn't necessarily fit kind of the, I guess, all-time career achievements and accomplishments of some of the other guys I named, like a Juan Dixon, like a Greivis Vasquez. Those two guys, of course, 1-2 all-time in Maryland basketball scoring. Last guy doesn't match that. But the last guy I kind of put in this category, who I loved watching. Again, this is very personal. I want to hear from you. Tell me who's on your list, your top 4, top 5 that you just enjoyed watching, is Bruno Fernando. And it's for a very different reason than Derik Queen. It's because, like Greivis Vasquez, he was a guy who played the game with so much emotion, with so much passion. But everything he did was big. The way he dunked was big and thunderous. The way he blocked shots was impactful. He could change the feeling in that arena and the momentum of a game with one flick of the wrist, with one dunk, with one block. And the passion that he showed was something that I felt like at times was missing during the era in which he played. And he brought that passion, he brought that love for Maryland basketball to the court each and every night. So I always enjoyed watching Bruno Fernando. That'd be kind of the fourth guy on my list. Again, not the career achievement and accomplishment, in no way the same tier of player if you were going to make like your Mount Rushmore, your all-time great Terps as Juan Dixon, Gravis Vasquez. But to me, he was a guy that I just enjoyed watching so much because of the way he played, because of the passion that he had on the court. And that's the kind of the level that I'm talking about with Derik Queen. I enjoy watching him so much. So today, for me, today was the Derik Queen don't forget about me game. This is the Derik Queen I'm still a great player game. And I just want to end with this. He talked to the media post-game, and he talked about sharing the court with Ace Bailey, with Dylan Harper, two guys that he kind of grew up with on the AAU circuit, who have always been at the top of those rankings, and guys who are really highly regarded. And he said, hey, those are my guys. I love being on the court with them, but I want to remind everybody, I want to remind them that I'm coming for the freshman of the year too, that I'm staking my claim to Big Ten freshman of the year. And I think today was as good a showing as any, as good a case of any, as to why Derik Queen is right there in that running for the Big Ten Freshman of the Year award. So that's my piece on Derik Queen. Some other notes from the game that I just want to kind of run through real quick. Something to think about looking forward here. In this game, Tafara Gapari did not play because he was sick. Kevin Willard said after the game that that's why he didn't play. So in his place, Jordan Geronimo played. And Jordan Geronimo gave really good minutes in this game. 14 minutes, 2 dunks, 5 rebounds. 2 block shots. Every time Jordan Geronimo's in the game, he brings energy. He brings that emotion. And unfortunately, in this game, he goes up to challenge a shot. He gets hit in the face. He ended up having to get, it sounds like, some stitches after that and was unable to come back into the game. So that's something to just kind of watch going forward. I hate it for Jordan Geronimo because he did give such good minutes in that game. Believe it or not, he got called for the foul on that play, but he gave such good minutes in this game. He's a guy who had struggled with injuries throughout the course of the season. He's had some big moments here recently against Nebraska. He got some run today against Rutgers. He got some run and really provided something to the team. So hopefully Gapare is back recovering from that illness soon. Because it's TBD what the status of Jordan Geronimo is going to be. I'm guessing he'll be able to be back once those stitches come out. I'm not sure, to be perfectly honest. So we'll keep an eye on that, see what happens. But that's just something to note going forward is how quickly can Jordan Geronimo comes back? Hopefully he's not out too long. How quickly is Tafara Gapare back and at full strength? Because those are two guys that I think Maryland really needs and relies upon. They need at least one of them because they bring something to the table that I think nobody else does with that energy, with that emotion. They are the ultimate spark plug kind of guys, and it's really big when you see a situation like today where Julian Reese was in foul trouble, fouls out. He did not have his best game. It felt like he never really found a rhythm in this game. He ends up fouling out with 4 points in just 18 minutes of play. You need a guy like Jordan Geronimo to play alongside Derik Queen. You need a guy like Tafara Gapare to play alongside Derik Queen. And we've seen the opposite where Queen just doesn't have his best day. You need one of those guys to play alongside Julian Reese. So that's something from me that I'm watching today. Some other things I'm watching today. I thought Maryland's offense today was better than its defense once again. And Maryland did feel disjointed at times in this game offensively, especially early in the second half. But I can't say enough. I've just heaped praise on Derik Queen here for the last 20 minutes or so. I can't say enough the past couple games about Rodney Rice and what he's bringing to the table. Today, Rodney Rice goes for 19 points. He was 3 of 8 from beyond the arc. But what's really impressed me, both today and against Ohio State, is it feels like Rodney Rice is starting to show that he's a guy who's more than just a great shooter. And believe me, he is a good three-point shooter. He's a guy who can get unbelievably hot. He's a guy that can hit from almost anywhere on the court. He is a great shooter. But he's been showing a lot more than that the past couple games. He's showing his ability to get to the basket. He showed against Ohio State, I felt like, his ability to pass the ball. I thought he had a really good defensive possession at the end of the game. I believe it was him on Bruce Thornton at the end of that game against Ohio State. I thought he had a nice defensive possession on Bruce Thornton there, forcing him to take a tough shot on that final possession. And of course, he takes a tough shot. He makes it. He banks in that three. But I didn't think that was because Rodney Rice didn't play him well. I think, I talked in this last episode how Maryland has some really good perimeter defenders, but not a great perimeter defender. And I think Rodney Rice should be considered one of those very good perimeter defenders for the Terps. And look, Rodney Rice is a guy who I just think the sky is the limits for, because we've seen him in such a limited time over his college career. He barely played over the course of his career at Virginia Tech. He had some injuries. Then he didn't play at all last year because he decided to transfer. And he has looked so good after playing such little college basketball. You see him getting better defensively. You see the shooting ability. And now you're starting to see him do other things offensively where he is getting to the basket, where he is distributing the ball. I was really impressed with him the past couple games and his ability to do more than just shoot the basketball. So that was something I wanted to make sure I called out there as well. So from a negative perspective, because it was a win, I thought it was a good win. It's going to probably go down as a quad 2 win when all is said and done, because Rutgers at the moment is number 72 in the net. You have to be in the top 70. It has to be for a quad 2 win. Its teams ranked 31 to 75. So hopefully they stick in that top 75 there. Gives Maryland a quad 2 win, and that will put Maryland, if that does hold, at 5-5 in quad 1 games, 3-1 in quad 2 games. But there were some negatives too. And the thing that seems concerning over the past couple of games is just the way that Maryland is starting the second half of games. It seems like Maryland's had some moments where they get leads, and that doesn't seem like, I know for a fact they've gotten leads, and they haven't been able to extend them. They haven't been able to hold on to them. And part of that is, look, I always like to say to people, the other team's on scholarship too. The other team's trying too. People act like sometimes, you see it through your own team's lens and you're like, why can't they just pull away? Why can't they finish this game? It's not like the other team's not trying. So part of it is just, look, in college basketball, the margins are thin. In the Big Ten, the margins are thin. You're not always going to blow a team out. You're not always going to be able to take a 17-point lead and make it a 30-point lead. A lot of these games are going to end up being tight, and it's going to come down to who can adjust and adapt down the stretch. But something that is concerning a little bit for Maryland is the way they are not able to hold these leads and the way they are starting the second half of games. In this game, Maryland up 49-38 at halftime, and at a point, Rutgers cut that lead down to, I believe it was 3 points early in that second half. I'm trying to find the exact moment here, but I think they got it down to 3 points at some point early in the second half of this game. Yeah, it was 56-53 with 14 minutes left. So in a game that Maryland really felt like they dominated in the first half, up 49-38 at halftime, dropped nearly a 50 spot on Rutgers in the first half of that game. The fact that they had let that lead slip away with 14 minutes in the second half, and it was basically a new ball game. They were in for a rock fight, was concerning. Now, I will say, to get back to the positive side of things, they responded. It wasn't like Ohio State where they let it slip away, and some of that might just be being at home, but they responded, and they found a way to battle back and find a way to get a relatively comfortable win at the end of the day, a 9-point win. And Rodney Rice had some big shots in this game. Rodney Rice had a big 3. Rodney Rice had a 4-point play in this game that I thought was huge, at a huge moment in this game. Maryland was up by 4. Rice gets fouled, hits the 3, makes the free throw, 4-point play. All of a sudden, a 58-54 game becomes a 62-54 game, and Maryland gets a little more breathing room. That felt like a big pivotal moment in this game to me. So a little concerning that Maryland continues to kind of have trouble holding these leads, have trouble coming out in the second half, but encouraging that they didn't just let it avalanche. They didn't let it snowball. So those are my notes for today. Looking ahead, Maryland off until Thursday. They have a road game at Nebraska coming up. And this road game, it's a big one to me because Maryland, you look at Maryland's schedule the rest of the season. 7 games left, 4 at home, 3 on the road. The road games are at Nebraska, at Penn State, and at Michigan. Now, I think Michigan's one of the best 3 teams in the Big Ten. That's going to be a really tough one. Penn State has struggled mightily. Penn State has lost now 5 games in a row. Penn State has lost, in addition to 5 games in a row, has lost 9 of their last 10. They're 3-10 in the Big Ten. But that place has been a house of horrors for Maryland. So you look at those 3 road games, and Maryland has to, I think, just has to get at least one of them. Like, I don't want Maryland to finish this season 2-8 on the road in conference play. If you're trying to get a good seed in the NCAA tournament, if you're trying to finish in the top 4 in the Big Ten, you can't go 2-8 on the road in conference. It caps your Big Ten record at 12-8, which I don't think is going to be good enough to finish in the top 4. You look at where things stand right now. Maryland's at 8-5, a game back of Wisconsin and UCLA, who are tied at 9-4. So I think Maryland, it would be great for them to get 2 out of 3 on the road. They have to get at least 1 out of 3, which brings us to this Nebraska game, which is going to be a tough game, and that is certainly going to be a quad 1 game. And Nebraska is a team that Maryland played a very tight game with just a couple weeks ago at home. It's a team that has now won 4 in a row, who beat Illinois, who has beat Ohio State, who went on the road to the Pacific Northwest, where everybody has struggled with this West Coast road trip. No big deal for them. They beat Oregon, they beat Washington on the road, and all of a sudden Nebraska at 16-8, 6-7 in the league, you're starting to think like, okay, do they have a tournament shot sitting at number 51 in the net? So that will be a quad 1 game for Maryland, and that's going to be a really tough game for Maryland. That's the next one they have up, and you look back at the last game against Nebraska, it was a game where it came right down to the wire, where Maryland had to hit some big shots. Now, I think the advantage Maryland does have in this game is that their guards really thrived the last time out. Jacoby Gillespie, Rodney Rice, Selton Miguel, in that one combined for 50 points in the game. 22 for Gillespie, 15 for Rice, that's 37, and then 13 for Miguel, that's 50 on the nose. Maryland shot pretty well from beyond the arc in that one, 10-25, but Nebraska is a really tough place to play. I say it all the time, and people kind of look at me weird when I'm like, Nebraska has one of the most impressive fan bases to me, because this is a team, as of a few years ago, Nebraska basketball had never made the NCAA tournament. Now, that has changed. Nebraska men's basketball has now made a tournament. They made the tournament, I believe, just last year. But I think they had I'm sorry. Let me correct myself. Not they have never made the tournament. They had never won an NCAA tournament game. I believe Nebraska's first ever NCAA tournament win came in 2014. So, this is not a program with deep history here in Nebraska. But this Nebraska team always plays hard. This Nebraska crowd, and that's more to my point, this Nebraska crowd is always there. They always show up. They're always loud. Nebraska is one of the most impressive or most impressive fan bases out there because they always show up. You look at what they're able to do for their volleyball program, where they filled the football stadium for a volleyball game. This is a school and a state that is absolutely obsessed with their basketball program. That's absolutely obsessed with the Nebraska Cornhuskers. And let me correct myself here. Nebraska has never won an NCAA tournament game. Nebraska is 0-8 all time in the NCAA tournament. They've made the tournament 8 times, most recently last year where they lost to Texas A&M. They are 0-8 all time. My confusion was because back in 2014, they used to call the first round the second round because of the play-in game. They've fortunately corrected that kind of terminology here where it's back to just being called the first round. But Nebraska is 0-8 all time in NCAA tournament games. Nebraska has never won an NCAA tournament game, and they pack that place. They sell that place out. They're loud. It's a really tough place to play, especially when you combine it with the fact that Fred Hoiberg has put together of some pretty good teams the last few years. So you look at them this year, you look at Nebraska, they've lost just 2 home games. They lost to Rutgers in an 85-82 game, and they lost to USC in a 78-73 game. So they've lost a couple games by a combined 8 points. This is going to be a tough game for the Terps, but this is the kind of game that they have to win if they want to really establish themselves as a team that is top tier in the Big Ten, as a top 4, top 5 team in the Big Ten, as a team that can make a run in the NCAA tournament, because you got to win games away from home. So a few days off for the Terps, they hit the road again, then they come back for 3 at home, and that's where they're going to have to make hay with their home against Iowa, USC, and Michigan State. I will talk to you again after that Nebraska game. I'll be reacting to that and looking ahead to that home stand ahead. Until next time, this has been the Route 1 Rundown.